Hi, I'm Carol Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. You know, not so long ago, I wrote a column about a sort of general malaise among the electorate, and a lot of it may be a function of our national politics. It was very interesting. Not everything I write gets an overflow of mail, but this did, with a lot of people saying that they felt that. And then, of course, it was followed by the fact that in Great Barrington, Lenox, and Stockbridge, not one of the seats that are up for the May election is contested. We have one person, if we're lucky, running for each seat. And in Stockbridge, we have at least one seat for which no one is running. Now, I have the greatest guest, and you are going to be so delighted, because Jim Brooker is a longtime columnist, a great journalist, 24 years with the New York Times, 3 years with the Berkshire Eagle, that counts. And he was also at one point director of the Voice of America. It is with great pleasure that I want you to meet Jim Brooker, and we're going to be talking about how national and even international politics are affecting us here at home.
Great. Great. I look forward to it.
Well, okay, so let's get started on that. Do you see a direct link between what's going on in our country nationally and what we're sort of starting uninvited internationally, affecting whether or not we have any competitive races locally?
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that there are not competitive races, and we're very lucky here to have very qualified people running our towns. You know, no surprise, they're mostly retirees, and they're smart retirees, and we're lucky. I live in Lenox to have that. You saw the turnout for No Kings. I was in Lee and Stockbridge. That was a very healthy turnout. So on the national, there's a response. It's no big secret that these local offices often generally are not paid, and they're generally a lot of work. And you have to hold your tongue when people come to public meetings and say things they maybe shouldn't. But the No Kings is an example of people caring. I think on the international level, we had great news yesterday, which is the defeat of Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Yes.
And that really, you know, we were afraid that he'd sort of jigger the system. He did, but he lost overwhelmingly and had the brains to concede early. And he prided himself in running an illiberal democracy, which was really very authoritarian, and also being Vladimir Putin's water boy in Europe, inside the EU. And so he's out. That's great.
And it was as if he was part of a movement that journalists kept worrying was a shift away from democracies internationally. Yeah. Were you seeing that also?
Well, I mean, our Vice President, J.D. Vance, was there the week before, so he got egg on his face. He made a special trip to Budapest, campaigned very publicly for Orban, and then Orban promptly lost. The MAGA, it's sort of become a darling. Viktor Orban and CPAC, this Conservative Political Action Committee, whatever it is, they met in Budapest, and they took a real shine. I mean, one thing is slowing down on immigration, but a lot of his ideas were very retrograde, and some of the far-right people, they love Putin. Well, you know, Putin's government has legalized wife beating. I mean, it's very reactionary and very sort of return to the 1890s or something.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how Putin explains himself, but life in Russia is not comfortable, affordable, easy. I mean...
Well, he doesn't have to explain himself because he controls the media. All TV he controls, all newspapers he controls. all radio he controls, but most importantly, the internet. And there's an index of maybe 100,000 banned websites, including the one I work for. You mentioned Voice of America. The hottest thing in Moscow these days are these VPNs, which allow you to do an end run around the Great Firewall. But it's very ferocious censorship, and people say there are more political prisoners in Russia today than in the latter years of the Soviet Union. And the censorship is in some ways more ferocious. So Putin is afraid that the word will get out that 1.3 million soldiers have been killed and wounded in Ukraine. I mean, that is a presidency killer right there. He does not want that to be well known inside Russia.
You said something that interests me very much, and that I don't understand the mechanics thereof, and perhaps you do. You said Orban did attempt to rig the election, but still lost overwhelmingly. What is it that is attempted, and how is that defeated?
Well, he controlled the media, or much of the media, but he did allow a competitive election. Now, in Venezuela, Maduro lost, we think, about 60-40 18 months ago. But he just said, tough luck, I'm going to stop the count, and I've been reelected.
All right, so there are two parts to rigging an election. One is picking your voters, who you allow to vote and who you don't. And the second part is who counts the ballots.
And when do you stop counting because it's not going your way? A very interesting phenomenon in Hungary was they were shouting in Hungarian, Russians out, which was a chant going back to the 1957 Soviet occupation of Hungary. And as I mentioned, Orban was very close to Putin, and there's this incredible wiretaps that came out of his foreign minister talking to the Russian foreign minister and the Hungarian foreign minister saying, what documents can I get? I hope I didn't offend anyone in St. Petersburg when I made some comments. I mean, he's basically being a supplicant to the Russians. I'm sure money was changing hands there. But inside the EU, they saw Hungary as basically spying for Russia.
It seems to me, and believe me, I am no expert, so this is just you telling me. But it seems to me that we do too many things in a Trump administration that directly benefit Russia. Of course, the big one that I'm thinking about right now is lifting the embargo or the whatever on Russian oil.
Yeah.
And why was that done, and how much does it benefit Russia?
You know, we and the Israelis attacked Iran, which sounded good in terms of regime change, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be happening short term. But now we're stuck in that the oil prices are going up. In 6 months, Trump will face the midterms. He does not want to have $5 a gallon gas. In fact, even during the Biden administration, which now sounds like ancient history, they asked the Ukrainians to stop bombing Russian oil refineries because they didn't want the price of oil to go up during the summer driving season and pissing off American drivers. So, you know, here we are stuck with this Iran war. We're blockading the ports where no Iranian ship or Iranian cargo can leave Iran. That is already pushing up the price of oil and gas that you'll see. The 5 gas stations in Lee, you can just watch the digital meters change. There's even one in Stockbridge still. And we have a gas station in Center Lennox too. But anyhow, you know, we're kind of stuck with this because our allies see that we can't really defend them. And Trump is such a prideful man. He was really angered by Zelensky when he was trying to get reelected, and he asked Zelensky to investigate Hunter Biden, and Zelensky politely declined. And he's kept this grudge for 5 years, Trump has. And so he comes out with all these pro-Putin remarks and anti-Ukraine remarks when public opinion shows like the 75% of Americans who care support Ukraine. I mean, it's not a minority position. It's just that Trump is sort of off there in some strange orbit. And so time and time again, I mean, he was downgrading Ukrainian drones. We don't know any drones. Our drones are better. Sorry, 6 countries in the Gulf have signed deals with Ukraine to get their drones to protect themselves because the U.S. drones are not good enough to protect them. Right. Because the U.S. comes up with Patriots, which cost like $10 million apiece. The Ukrainians have drones, interceptor drones, that cost like $5,000.
It's almost as good as the Israeli Shield in terms of
It works, and and so they're importing these drones. The Ukrainians have actually shot down Iranian drones missiles coming in, drones coming in. Ukraine is state of the art, unfortunately, because of the war. Britain, France, Germany, Denmark are all co-producing drones with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And here we have the leader of the United States saying, "Oh, they're crummy drones." I mean, it's unreal.
Regardless of Trump's motivations, because that may be more in my field than yours. To what extent has he materially helped and propped up Putin? Because Putin was engaged in a very self-destructive path with Ukraine. He was losing in a way. In a way, it was as if it were an impasse, but as if it were an impasse with a mega country and this little itsy-bitsy country. And
yeah. Of course, Ukraine isn't that itsy-bitsy. It's the size of California. But, you know, Donald Trump is Putin's last hope in Ukraine. And they make no bones. The Russian state media make no bones about this. You look at these peace talks, and Donald Trump is the only man in the world who probably could bring peace to the area. But the Russians say, well, we want this part of the Donbass. Well, you've been fighting for 4 years to conquer that. You are unable militarily to take this land. Why should it be handed over to you? You know, what gives? You haven't conquered it. What has Putin achieved? In the last 4 years, he hasn't conquered one regional capital. Right. He's nowhere near Kyiv, obviously. And people say, oh, they're grinding forward. They're like grinding backward. They lost 150 square miles in March, about the size of southern Berkshire County. I mean, it's an impasse. You know, it's a stalemate. But they are not winning. And then geopolitically, they're in terrible shape. I mean, they just lost Orban, but they lost Maduro. They lost Assad, head of Syria, who had been a family friend for 40 years of the Soviet Union. Khomeini is turned into radioactive dust, and Cuba will probably go later this year, like it or not. So they're showing them, Moscow is showing itself to be very weak. Look at NATO. Finland and Sweden joined, where they've been sitting on the fence for 80 years. They joined. Poland is buying like 3,000 tanks from South Korea. Poland is totally energized the threat from the east. They're not buying them to face the Germans. They're buying them to face the Russians. We have even Moldova and Armenia are pulling out of this sort of Russian Commonwealth of Nations called the CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States. So the Russian world is shrinking. And what about their fabled arms? They're like, oh, you know, the Venezuelans have Russian-supplied anti-aircraft systems. We sent 30 planes and helicopters into Caracas in early January. Not a single one was downed. Not a single one. And then she said, well, it's the tropics. They didn't really unpack the stuff in the boxes. You know, and look at, like Iran or not, I think we've had one plane hit. Yeah, the 2 guys went down. one plane out of 8,000 sorties. And this is Russian anti-aircraft materiel equipment at its best. Everyone was like, oh, the Russians are selling them SS-20s or whatever they're called. Didn't work. Didn't work. I mean, so it's not a great advertisement for the Russian arms industry.
So I return to this view that we have a president of the United States that's propping up Russia.
I think he's giving Putin his last hope, because Putin has been offered off-ramps for 4 years now. And the problem, the elephant in the room, is 1.3 million men killed or severely wounded. And, you know, it isn't a coincidence that the Soviet troops left Afghanistan, the Soviet Union fell the next year. I mean, look at the dates, you know. They left Afghanistan in 89, and I think it was in Christmas 90 that the Soviet Union formally dissolved. They all know that. I mean, Putin was a victim of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's why they're censoring anything that moves. And, you know, if they were self-confident, they would not be censoring front, left, right, and center. They're hoping that Trump will pull a rabbit out of a hat, but Trump is totally distracted by Iran. So he's not focused on Ukraine. What was interesting is last week, Ukraine's new chief of staff said he thought there would be a peace deal, quote, soon. And this isn't just any old guy. This guy was head of military intelligence and did all the black ops deep into Russia, like killing generals, mowing their lawn, this kind of thing. So he is a proven performer. He's not a lightweight. And when he talks, people listen. So who knows?
So he sees something.
But the Chinese have no interest in peace because they want to see a weak Russia so they can get better deals on the gas, on the wood, on the iron, you know, whatever they're getting out of Russia. They want to see a weak Russia, so they're not going to be the master peacemakers.
What was it like that 24 years at the New York Times?
Very, very grueling. It's especially being overseas. It's kind of a young man's business, I mean, to be blunt, or a young woman's business now. You're on, and my last assignment was in Japan. I covered Japan and Koreas. I went over there, sent by a newspaper called the New York Times. By the time I left, I was filing for 3 outlets: the New York Times, International Tribune, and then this crazy thing called the Internet, which is like working for a radio station, just around the clock, you know, no single deadline. I mean, I went from having maybe a 6 a.m. Tokyo time deadline to basically being on all the time and having to know when to say no and when to shut people off. So that was physically pretty exhausting, frankly.
And then when you first came back here,
yeah,
you were with the Eagle.
Well,
it was so nice having you.
Thank you. No, I contributed columns once or twice a week for the Eagle of Foreign Affairs. And, you know, the Eagle is very well read. I mean, you get response to your columns, and I got a lot of response to my columns, you know, and it kind of made me a big man on campus for a year or two.
No, it is. It's very well read, and it's very interactive.
Yeah.
You get stopped everywhere.
Right.
I just read your column. I want to tell you, you know.
Exactly.
Which is lovely.
I had a letter in the Eagle a week ago. And 4 or 5 people sort of mentioned it. You know, I mean, I think the letters of the Eagle are some of the most interesting parts of the Eagle, and people are reading it.
Do you want to know something funny? So I have I have Stockbridge updates, and that's online only. And if you have that kind of control, you can see all kinds of things. How many people open it? How many, what do they read? In what order do they read things? And it's very interesting because I was always on an op-ed page, and I think you were on an op-ed page. And what's really interesting about life on the op-ed page is I watch every reader of Stockbridge updates. They read my editorial first and the letter second.
Interesting, yeah.
And then they go back and read the news.
And Carol, you really have distribution of 2,000? If I may be impertinent, that sounds like about 60% of Stockbridge right there.
Well,
What's the population of Stockbridge these days?
1,825 permanent in 730 households. And then, starting with COVID, we doubled. Now, at the height of the summer, we have almost 4,000, 3,000 something. And they've almost,
We have great penetration.
Just mushroom. Yeah, no, it's
when
good.
we were kids, the Eagle would go to like 60% of households in the Berkshires, and I'm afraid it's not there. They should buy you out. I'm one of these acquiring guys. Just grab all these little newspapers and...
that conversation took place at one point.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So anyway, at that, I probably just said one sentence too many, so we'll move right on. One of the things I noticed about the New York Times, the op-ed page, I focus there, as you might, is that an editor on an op-ed page used to have a very easy job. It was like line editing. You read for mistakes in punctuation or spelling or paragraphing or whatever. But the New York Times at some point became very much more active in the editing department, and then other newspapers followed. And what happened was, even though it was opinion, you had to prove fact.
Yeah. Well, that can be good. Carol, when I was passed over by the Berkshire Eagle at age 23 and couldn't get a job here, I was hired by the New York Times to be
interesting experience.
Right, to be a news clerk for James Reston, who was the big Washington columnist. And I was his sort of sidekick. And you're right. In that time, the tough thing was that Scotty would have a glass of scotch and maybe be a little slow. That was back in the days, I think, the dictation and maybe even telex. And poor Bob Barzilay would be shitting bricks, essentially, at the last minute trying to get the copy and getting it grammatically correct. It was not double-checking the column at all.
And not at all.
Which if it's really facts, I like that. Maureen Dowd had a wonderful column trying to shed insight into this bizarre statement by Melania Trump.
Oh, do tell us.
Yeah. And, Maureen Dowd, it's Maureen Caddy Dowd. I mean, she was in her element talking about Melania, and she came up with some interesting stuff. And I assume that was fact-checked.
Now, what was a suggestion from the Maureen Dowd, the one and only Maureen
this odd
Dowd?
thing, and Melania said, the rumors are not true. It's like, oh, we didn't know about the rumors. Thanks for telling 100 million people about this. And there was a model from Brazil, where I lived for many years, from Londrina, Brazil, who... it's very complicated, but there was a child custody fight, and she was gladiating with Trump's person for global affairs, and so she got deported, and she was insinuating that Melania kind of dropped a dime on her and saying, this girl is not here legally or something. And so she's sitting down in Brazil sending off these little...
But who was the father, do we know?
The father is Mr. Zampoli, who was very tight with Melania, who claims he introduced Melania to Trump.
Correct.
And that was sort of the issue of Melania's press conference, that no, we were not introduced by Jeffrey Epstein. We were introduced by nice Mr. Zampoli.
I watched the whole thing in absolute...
You did? We watched it, wow.
In awe.
Yeah.
Well, it was a complete accident.
Yeah.
I have no idea how I found myself in front of the TV or where exactly I was standing when I was watching. But as I saw the TV screen, she was walking down that hallway toward the podium, and I thought, well, okay. So I stood there and listened. And it was startling. It was like someone who didn't speak the language or didn't get the memo or was not actually invited to the party, and you didn't know why she was there or what had prompted her to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we're attacking Iran to shift the topic from Epstein, and then Melania brings us right back. I watched the movie, and I do recommend watching the movie.
Really?
It's sort of it is nauseating, but it's a political document. It helps you understand our times. And I watched it brushing the winter coat out of my Cocker Spaniel, which was more productive. But it gives you insight into what's happening in the White House, and it's nauseating and gross. But watch it; it's free, I think, on Amazon Prime or Netflix, and no one's going to rat on you if you're caught watching it.
I used to live on Bradley Boulevard in Washington, D.C., which is and I lived, kind of walking distance to the Potomac line, where the name of Bradley Boulevard changes. I'm trying to give you sort of a physical reference. And she bought a house, reputedly, for her parents during the first administration, and in fact, she brought them over, and in fact, so far as I know, they lived there. But the point is, so did she. Mm-hmm. So it never occurred to me that finding out anything about the White House could come from Melania. She's very, very rarely there.
Yeah, the father's in the movie, and he's got this sort of post-Soviet V8 camera, and he's going up and down the plane taking home movies. He's kind of a funny guy. Unfortunately, he passed away, but it's he's one of the lighter elements of the movie, more normal elements, you'd say. The mother's there too. Yeah.
Well, we have to do this again because we're out of time. And you are a wealth. We can hop from nation to nation.
Well, I can. 100 countries.
Oh, my God. And you can tell us all about it. What a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Carol, thanks for having me. Good.